So this question I'm going to propose to Chair Don Kenobi and Daryl Johnson. Recently the voters of LA approved Measure R, and prior to that Measure 2 for Orange County, which is expected to provide transportation funding at your local level. What are some of the creative, innovative delivery methods that have been considered or being considered, and then how will the voters of Orange County and LA know that they are getting what they voted for?
Trust me. All right. As I mentioned up front, in regards to the other issue, obviously the P3 piece of this is very, very important. We have our developing business plans for 6 different projects, 3 rail, 3 highway, and trying to create this scenario to make sure that we're able to show the voters who supported Measure R and who supported A and C that they're going to get their bang for the buck. And one of the reasons and one of the ways we're trying to do that is through the 30-10 piece as well, taking our 30 years guarantee of the sales tax, compressing that, and trying to do as many projects as we can within the first 10 years. Obviously, that takes a lot of cooperation from the federal government. It gets a lot more noise here locally in the favorites than it does in Washington. Because every dollar that they front us, even though we have the ability to pay back, takes away potentially from other projects across the country, whether it be the infrastructure bank, which would be great if we could isolate it from transportation. The thing that made me nervous, that press conference was held in Wisconsin, and I almost have as many people in my district that are in Wisconsin. And so it's an issue that we continually try to do, but we're trying to be upfront as we do it. We have the regional connector with this project's going, so it's a 2-mile length. It's going to hook up the Metro Gold, Blue, and Expo Light Rail lines through Los Angeles on a continuous. It's a huge piece to our entire network. That front end of EIR was approved yesterday, historic. We have the I-710 South Corridor, another project that we're trying to build the business. This is the Long Beach Freeway. Unfortunately, Roger, you didn't have to come to Long Beach Freeway, but linking the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach to our major Southern California distribution centers. Anyone that's been on that freeway knows the potential of congestion and mingling of trucks and cars. And, just a quick take back on that. Again, you always have to politically try to stay in course when you try to design and build these projects. One of the most frustrating things to the taxpayers is the Alameda Corridor. I sit on the Alameda Corridor Authority, but the original design is what everybody has in mind because that's the way it was publicized. The original design showed the Alameda Corridor, which it is today, on time and on budget. But alongside the corridor were truck lane traffic. And you had
well, I think Melanie had 2 questions. What innovative financing or innovative delivery methods under the sales tax program, and then also how do voters know that they're getting what they paid for? So I'm going to turn it around actually and answer the second one first. I think we're coming to the close in Orange County of our first measure. It will end on March 30th, 2011. And our second measure begins on April 1st, 2011. It goes for 30 years. So when we went to the voters in 2005 for the renewal, we really focused on a promises made, promises kept theme. And in fact, we're continuing to do that. They believed us when we went to the voters in November of 2006. About 4 weeks ago, we opened the last freeway project under Measure M1 in Orange County, the I-5 Far North, the I-5 Gateway project. There's been a number of references to that today. Many people saw that when they came through Buena Park. In addition to that, we also added what we call the bonus project. We added a $600 million project into the original sales tax program. That was the SR22 project. Without that measure in place, we couldn't have attracted the state and the federal funds that were needed to complete that program. We've been very transparent in telling the voters that we've delivered what we promised on. We're going to wrap up our Streets and Roads program by the first quarter of next year. Our last outstanding transit program is the expansion of the Metrolink service within the county. We're well underway to do that. And we firmly believe that we'll have a very good, clean closeout of Measure M1 as we go forward. However, with that, under Measure M2, we added even more taxpayer safeguards. We added more transparency into the program. We think that's really, really important. This is a half cent. 30 years is a long time, and it generates a lot of money. We really want the taxpayers to know what we're doing with that. So we've added additional oversight, additional opportunities for input, and additional assessments on a 3-year basis. Also, to get that plan kickstarted, this is sort of on the innovative delivery side, similar to the 30-10 plan that the supervisor talked about. In 2007, the OCTA board approved what we call the Early Action Plan. that really said, we've got 4 years before we start collecting sales tax in Orange County. How can we get projects underway in advance of that? So that was a number of things. It was about a $4 billion program. Some of the initial work in that is about to be complete. Again, remember I said we don't even start collecting the sales tax until April 1st of 2011. But if you drive the Riverside Freeway, the 91 in the eastbound direction, you're going to see a 7-mile lane widening as you go from the 241 to the 71. We expect that will open to traffic by the end of this calendar year. That was one of the first projects promised in Measure M2, and it's about done. And again, haven't started collecting the sales tax yet. We promised the voters that we would do rail safety improvements at 50 crossings within the county. Those will be done in the middle of next year. We opened the first 9 last month in the city of Orange. And that's an $85 million program. We went to the marketplace and looked for short-term financing and long-term financing. We had faith from the investment community. Kind of back to Roger's comment on investment as opposed to grants. We had faith from the investment community to make an investment in transportation in Orange County, and it would be paid off. In terms of innovative delivery, under the new sales tax program, I go back to the I-405 example. We promised the voters, again, that we would add capacity from one end of the 405 in Orange County to the other end of the 405. We've always known that the measure dollars would not be sufficient. We always look to state and federal opportunities, whether it be through the state STIP program, the 1B program, or the federal CMAQ program. But at the same time, we're going through the technical and analyzing the toll. And that's our focus on that. And we're asking the public what they think. We're going through that environmental process now. And I would go back to these things are technically able to be done, but we need to understand what the policy implications are. And that's really important to the policymakers. We need to make sure that we keep that in mind at the same time that we're making our commitments to the voters.
Have toll roads. So this question is to both of you. More and more of not only your agencies, but throughout the state, toll roads are being considered. And you both have toll roads in your respective geographic locations. Can you kind of shed some light on what some of the lessons learned were, or any creative delivery methods used? How did you consider factor in sharing some of the risks? Daryl, you mentioned that you worked with TCA, and maybe you can just kind of explain that a little bit.
Sure. Well, the first lesson I learned this morning is we need to get Roger a 91 Express Lanes transponder, so we'll get you an account. But I think a couple of things. We'll do a custom visit for you afterwards. So, in working with the TCAs, it's important to understand what the outcome is. As I mentioned earlier, we've focused on 91 Express Lanes as a mobility solution. We purchased the lanes in an operating mode. They had debt with them, of course. We continue to focus on the throughput on the overall corridor, which is a little bit different than the TCA model. The TCA model was looking at the toll facility that they own and operate is the only game in town for the 241 to the 133 to the 261, etc. They have bondholders they need to pay off. They're looking at overall traffic and revenue, and they don't have the free component. They don't have the same mobility component. So as we look at things like a direct connector from the 91 toll lanes to the 241 toll facility and the extension into Riverside County, there's different outcomes at work. And we need to understand that toll policies do different things. Again, our toll policy is set up to focus on mobility and throughput, and the toll policy of the TCAs isn't quite the same. It's looking at making sure they have the appropriate revenue sources to pay off their providers. I think the other thing that we've learned is that we need to have a clear and transparent toll policy for the customers. They need to understand when tolls change, how they change, what the reasoning for changing is, and tolling is very personal to people about what they're willing to pay to get to a point in time. So what we've done, which we think has worked really well, is we've set the policy based upon volume and throughput, and it's a self-adjusting policy. So over every quarter, it's sort of a half-dynamic pricing policy. Every quarter, as traffic either increases or decreases, the tolls are automatically adjusted, and it doesn't go back to a vote in front of the OCT board. It takes that kind of the political decision out of it. It's a business decision. And as the ridership on the facility increased in the early 2000s, as the economy was moving, tolls went up. As the recession in 2008 hit and traffic was down on the general purpose lanes in the toll facility, we lowered tolls. And we did that, I believe, close to 24 times over the 2.5-year period to really accommodate the throughputs. Again, focusing on that and making sure that the customer knows what they get. Because what we want to sell to them is reliability from one end of the facility to the other end of the facility. We don't want them to have to pay $7 or $8 and then still sit in traffic. So we want to have that credibility and that reliability with them. And then I think the other thing I would close with is, Gary and I talked about this before, it's the policy that you have on the use of excess toll revenues or toll profit. It's different for every region. I believe your policy is more focused on putting it back into transit operations. Ours is more focused on putting it back within any type of mode within the corridor. It could be additional lane capacity in the corridor. It could be rail operations in the corridor, bus operations in the corridor within a zone. And it's really important for the customers and the taxpayers to know what their excess toll revenues are doing to improve transportation in the corridor. So we try to make that a very important part of our overall message to customers.
And it's a design-bid-build relationship between Caltrans and the contractor is significantly different than in a design sequencing kind of an approach, certainly, and with the design-build or a public-private partnership. Each has its different dynamics in play. Each has its different opportunities. It depends on the particular project. What we've seen from the results in other states is design build, design sequencing. Sometimes you save money, sometimes you don't. What you do typically see is fewer contract change orders or claims during the process because of that dynamic of the contractor working very closely with the designer up front. But you do tend to see across the board a significant savings in time.
Thank you, Gary and Cindy. Okay, I will provide an opportunity for audience comments. I have one final question for Cindy, but I don't want you to run out of the room because my final question to the panel is really a fun question, so I want you to stick around for that. Gary, you mentioned looking for permanent delivery tools in the toolbox. Cindy, part of the SB4 in 2009 also allowed for design build as a demonstration program, which, if proven successful, could become a permanent delivery method. In the legislation, 10 slots were provided for the state, 5 for local. As everyone knows, we had challenges on the local side. But on the state side, are 10 slots adequate to provide good data for evaluation purposes on whether if it's best value or low bid in the procurement methods?
I think that you're always going to, every project, I think as Roger mentioned earlier, every project is going to be a little bit different. But I think that 10 projects is certainly a good, strong start. I don't think that we're going to get out of this 10 projects and say at the end, they all have to be best value or they all should be low bid. You have to keep as many things in play as you possibly can, so you're making the best decisions based on the projects that you have ahead of you. We do know, for example, that you don't want to use the design-build method if you have huge right-of-way issues, because the right-of-way laws here in California are going to get in the way of the design-build contract. So that's one of the kinds of things that we need to be identifying, I think, with these first 10 projects, because we are particularly looking at trying to get an array, large, small, complex, not so, to kind of get a feel for what kind of criteria we should apply in determining what kind of